One of the best things about virtual reality is that it allows developers to take the rulebook, douse it in fuel, light it, and then throw it out of the window. And the makers of Star Trek Bridge Crew have done just that. Before we continue with this video though, it's worth saying this is a first impressions because we've only had a few hours with the game so far, and I just wanted to get a video out there to share with you the specifics of why this is actually quite an exciting game, even if you don't like VR, even if you don't like Star Trek, and even if you're a really miserable person that lives under a rain cloud like most British people. Now, the first thing that really stands out with Star Trek Bridge Crew, which is rather tangential to any of the gameplay, is the initial menu screen. You're in a little shuttlecraft flying around, and it's a really cool way to introduce you to the menu and actually select options. But bizarrely, if you happen to have been born with a penis, you'll find that you are a female. Now, normally, in most games, you wouldn't notice this. You'd be like, oh, I'm a female character. But in virtual reality, because your hands are tracked and you actually feel like the body is your body, when you look down at your nice legs, I have to say, very, very nice legs. I would be very proud of those legs if I had those legs, rather than my hairy man beast legs. It just feels really weird. It feels like you've just spontaneously had a sex change. You really don't expect to be clicking on the button to play Star Trek and then finding out that you've swapped sex. But as I say, what's really apparent immediately is a fantastic sense of presence. You really do feel like you're in this environment. Your hands are really nicely linked to the controllers. And you've not just got your hands in the game, but they've animated and worked out the your arm position all the way up to your shoulders. So again, it really does just give you a sense of presence. You feel like you've got a body in the game. Probably some of the best virtual reality arms that I have seen in a VR title at this point in time. Now to the bread and butter. It's worth noting that basically the way that this game works is you have the different positions on the starship. You can be the captain, you can be the engineer, you can be the tactical guy, or you can be the guy that drives the ship. Now, if you're playing in single player, you can have AI characters that you kind of boss around and tell them what to do. But really, the real exciting way and what I feel this game really achieves well, and the point of this game, is to do it in multiplayer, where you just have your one role that you take, and other human beings, other flesh bags, take the other roles, and then you basically just role play as that character in that position. And this is where you'd expect everything to fall apart. And I think traditionally, if this was a 2D game, it wouldn't work. It would just be clumsy. People wouldn't have microphones on by default. You wouldn't be able to look around and tell people what to do clearly. You wouldn't be able to gesture to people. But in virtual reality, I simply can't get over how seamless everything works. Even when you just go and click on quick launch, you find yourself appearing in a little ready room and waiting for other people to join, and then they join on the table around you, and from that point onwards you can talk and interact with those people. So immediately, even before you launch the mission, you can have a little bit of a conversation, get to know who's going to join you, decide which role you're going to have, maybe talk about your experience of the game so far, if you know what you're doing or not. And it instantly creates this sort of communication, a little bit of social bonding. It's like one of those really bad business events that they send you to team build, but you immediately actually develop a bit of rapport with your team, and it's crucial for actually making things work when it goes into the mission itself. Obviously, there's going to be variation to this, and I'm sure you're going to get put into lobbies with people that are really annoying. So it's always going to be a case that you probably want to find, either coincidentally get put with good people and then add them as friends, and then in the future probably play with those similar people that you initially play with, or anyone that you actually have fun with. Fortunately, my first multiplayer game though, my first couple of multiplayer games were always with people that were actually easy to get on with, spoke English and wanted to talk and just get into the game. So once we actually launched into the mission, on that screen you can choose which mission you want to do. There's a bunch to select from, and hopefully there'll be more in the future. But once you launch into the mission, you find yourself in your position on the ship and ready to get on with things. Now, rather than go deep into the mechanics for each position, what I'll do is just give a general overview, because this is a first impressions video, as I say. But in general, each position that you can play has a reasonable amount of depth to it. It's a good balance between having something that can be learnt at a basic level reasonably fast, but isn't too complicated that if someone has to work out the basics of interacting with their control panel, that they can't do it, especially in the earlier missions. Now, there is enough depth there that it can actually be take a reasonable amount of skill to get the most out of each position, but you'll find that the success and failure of the mission as a whole, or how well you do at missions, really doesn't come down to the individual ability of each player's controlling their panels, though that does have an effect, but it comes down mostly to communication from the captain to crew members knowing how to use their positions well and maybe being a little bit familiar with things, but on the whole just making decisions in unison and having people execute them properly as well as doing their functions well. Surprisingly, pretty much as you would expect what would be the case on a real starship, which is incredible. And I have to say, this is the closest game that has ever come, in my opinion, to being in command or actually being part of a crew on a starship in space. Forget Star Trek, but just actually using a spaceship and doing that as a crew. This is the best simulator of that experience you could possibly have. Now, a really nice touch on the bridge with you whilst you're playing, aside from your human friends, are some AI characters that they don't really do anything in terms of the gameplay, but they do give you subtle hints every now and again, convey parts of the story or what's going on in the mission, and let you know what's going on with certain audible cues. And they're a really nice way of naturally making you feel as if you're on an active bridge, not just with your main crew members, but with an actual, a starship with its own crew as well. And you'll also find when you start taking on damage or indeed begin to lose missions, which probably will happen quite a bit when you first start playing, that these characters get blown up and die and then get beamed off the bridge from your mistakes. And somewhat amusingly, we on this crew we do have one of the most dedicated and hardy Vulcans, which despite having his panel blow up and be in flames, will just sit there happily continuing away at his job. You have to give Vulcans credit at ignoring their emotions. Now, rather than just giving this positive, glowing initial first impressions, there are a few things that I think could be a little bit better with this game. The first one is graphically, I think it's really polished. It does look really nice and it runs really well. Sometimes it does feel a little bit cartoony, which I think can diminish the effective feelings if you're actually in a starship for real, though you do get really immersed. VR does a fantastic job and you do have presence, so that's not really that much of a problem, but it's more of a stylistic choice from the developers, probably to make sure that it can run well on the various platforms that it's out on. The only really detrimental thing I think with some of the graphics is if you go outside of the starship and look at the space around the starship, it's often very apparent that the skybox and the space surrounding you is 2D, and it looks like it's actually quite close to you. And I think they could have done a better job of making it appear as if it's further away. Maybe use some kind of procedural stars or something rather than what appears to be just a textured skybox around you. And maybe in some cases just locking the camera to inside the starship would really help increase immersion. The external shots, it feels unnatural because you're floating around, you're floating outside of this ship in a third-person view. What would be really nice actually is if they just made it look as if you're looking at a screen of the ship in an external view, thus tying you to the game world. So little things like that I think don't really break the game. They're not a problem, but they definitely do take from raw absolute immersion that you can have at times with this game. One more significant niggle I find in terms of the actual gameplay is sometimes how you interact with the control panels. It doesn't quite feel right where your finger is pushing the button. So when it gets really hectic with certain battles, especially if you're on the weapons control panel and you're listening to the captain's commands and you're trying to select and do scans and do various things, which can be quite small tick boxes to activate, and you're under quite a lot of time pressure, you can end up pushing the wrong button. This, I think, is a more significant problem. I would like to see more menu options in the game, maybe like a little a pointer that's projected down from your finger so you can see exactly what you're going to be clicking on. Buttons do highlight themselves before you push them, and you can kind of see where it is, so maybe that's just a case of needing a bit more practice, but it's It's not quite as precise as I think it could be, though, you know, on the grand scheme of things, when it comes to interacting with what are very small buttons in VR with obviously no tactile response to those buttons because you're using floaty hand controllers, they have, as an initial, as a first attempt, done a really good job. It's definitely better than a lot of other VR games, though could just do with being a little bit better in my opinion. And lastly, in terms of reservations or niggles with this game, I do worry a little bit how long the content's going to last. Having said that, I can see there's going to be quite a bit of potential for replayability in terms of doing the missions that are there on the different positions and with different crews and trying to do them better, or approaching the missions in different ways, because you can choose to engage enemies, abandon a mission effectively, allowing people to die and not do so. Well, there's different approaches to them. So of the missions that are there is ways to replay them and maybe do them more optimally. But for someone that just wants to go through missions once and experience them one at a time, then you'll probably get through it quite fast. I've not tried the procedural mission mode, so that'll be interesting to try it. We'll check that in a proper future video. And I've not gone through the whole game, but I just intuitively sense that it might not take that long to get all the way through it. Though, I really don't think you can sort of compare this to other games in that sense of, oh, here's a single player, let's go through it, because it is more of a partly role-playing the experience of being inside a starship, but there's just that huge social component to it, where even if the mission's exactly the same, even if you all knew exactly what you were doing and were experienced at it, you can also actually put your own emphasis and own enjoyment with who you're playing with and how you approach the game yourself, which is just something completely new to VR in general, to this type of game in general. I think Star Trek fans in particular, Trekkies if you will, they will have an absolute mental breakdown with this game. I think this is the first Star Trek game I've played that genuinely captures what you think it would be like to be inside of Star Trek itself. The closest thing to this game wouldn't be any of the other games that have gone in the past, but it'd be going to one of those role-playing events in reality where everyone pretends to be on a starship. But this is actually in your sitting room, and then obviously you can just connect with people, and you've got the actual ship there and stuff actually happening. As I say, it will absolutely blow the minds of Trekkies. Unfortunately, through generally solid design and just the implementation of how everything comes together, even if you hated Star Trek, at its core, this is, in my opinion, from the time I spent with it, a fun and well worth playing game. If you've got a VR headset, PlayStation VR, Oculus, HTC Vive, any other VR headset that's supported, this is going to be a game that even if you don't get it now, you're going to get eventually. This is a benchmark VR title, even ignoring the Star Trek IP. So I think that pretty much covers the basics, the first impressions of this game. We will be doing a follow-up review at some point once we've gone through it all and played all the different things and have a better understanding of the game. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Don't forget to like us. Feel free to ask any questions. Feel free to join the Gamer Muscle Steam group, and you can jump into a starship with us and we can destroy the Klingons ourselves. I have found when I'm playing this game so far, I tend to be a little bit aggressive. I think the Star Trek method is normally negotiation or trying to avoid conflict. My approach has been just kill everything. Maybe I haven't learned anything by watching Star Trek over the years, but that has been an enjoyable way to play the game so far. Yes, until the next video, thanks for watching everybody. Take care, live long and prosper, goodbye.